charges in neighbouring authorities and made a decision to increase our green waste charges for the next year. The charges that we have decided to apply are less than the charges applied by two of our neighbouring authorities, in one case considerably less. The support previously available to low-income households is government dependent and is changing from the Household Support Fund to the Crisis and Resilience Fund. More will be known by April. Low-income households who cannot cope will be able to apply for support in a different way. A budget is not just about revenue expenditure, it is about much more, including the capital projects that we intend to develop during the period. We have a very ambitious programme of some £31 million worth of capital expenditure during the next year, much of which will be connected to the legacy we wish to leave by the time reorganisation happens. We will need to be nimble to make sure that all these projects reach the level of completion that we want them to. The priorities of those projects which we believe will be important to Rutland residents after reorganisation. There isn't sufficient time for me to talk about all the projects that we will undertake, so I'll highlight a few of those that are detailed in the back. Under tackling the climate emergency, we are looking at active travel schemes through Oakham to Rutland Water and Cold Overton Road that will cost £3 million. We are looking at spending £500,000 on biodiversity net gain. A diverse and sustainable local economy, we are spending £6 million on the cultural centre, £1 million on public realm strategy, £4.3 million on the Love Meditech Innovation Centre, £13.3 million on highways, the highways capital programme, and £9.1 million on the local transport plan. In providing effective public services, we are spending £2.6 million on the local link via Jules House, and we are spending £400,000 in X-ray provision for the county at Rutland Memorial Hospital. In supporting the most vulnerable, we are spending £1.5 million on a children's capital placement programme, which will allow us to offer facilities that we have not previously offered. We are spending £2.6 million on the SEND capital expenditure programme, and we are supporting health provision at Rutland Memorial to the tune of £1.2 million as part of our LOVE commitment. In preparing this budget, we have tried to consult across all parties and groups in the council so that we share our thinking and get alternative ideas. As a principle, we want to be transparent and consultative. In particular, we have held individual sessions with the shadow portfolio holder for finance to ensure the party opposite is briefed on our proposals and understands the funding environment. Additionally, we have held two briefing sessions for all councillors during the budgeting process, although it's very disappointing that only 11 councillors turned up for the first briefing, the vast majority of these being from my party. I don't wish to lecture, but if councillors will display this level of interest and do not engage when given the opportunity, it is not surprising that their ideas are not able to be incorporated. At this point, I would particularly like to thank everybody in our finance team for their hard work in preparing this budget and MTFS. Much has depended on the leadership of Kirsty Mutton and Andrew Merrick, but there are many unsung heroes that have contributed, both in finance and in the wider organisation. They have stuck to a very thorough process that has resulted in the robust assumptions that underpin the budget, at the same time as making it the most transparent and understandable that we have produced. It is very gratifying to learn that they have been named as finalists for the award of Finance Team of the Year by a national trade journal. I congratulate them all and I'm very proud of them all. I commend this budget, the medium-term financial strategy, to the Council and propose that it be approved as detailed.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Waller. Case members open to debate. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to reciprocate those comments about our finance team. I think we've done an outstanding job in this budget, and I actually support it. I've got 4 questions by way of clarification. I apologise, I've got a low pair of glasses. I've my glasses at home, but there we go, that's better. So these are points of clarification to Councillor Johnson. Regarding the investment and visitor economy, can you explain why the short-term investments, which are predominantly in people, will no longer be required in Year 3? Secondly, in roads, I support the policy of preventive maintenance that you've outlined, any other approach being financially incontinent. Could I have confirmation that the roads budget, and specifically the additional government funding provided for potholes, is reflected in the numbers presented? Thirdly, in relation to SEND, it is noted that as a result of the government's new national approach to SEND, all local authorities will receive 90% of the cumulative deficit to 31st of March 2026 in the autumn of 2026. Presently, 100% of the forecast deficit is covered by the government override, thereby leaving £1 million to the account of this council. So my questions are, will these monies be applied to reducing debt and thus interest costs in 2026-27? And secondly, given that the SEND risk is now materially reduced, will this have any impact upon our reserves policy, there you go, the reserves again, going forward? And lastly, the letter that you have sent to the Housing, Communities and Local Government Office, which I entirely support, notes a significant divergence in per pupil funding of SEND. Has this situation been affected in any way by the government's recent announcement? Because your letter was actually, as I've said, was dated the 22nd of January. Thank you.
Councillor Ross, the members. Councillor Penny, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Rutland's penultimate budget and a 0% increase, if there is such a thing, in council tax, that's great news for our residents, especially in a challenging political and financial backdrop. I do worry about many things, which hence my contribution to the Audit and Risk Committee, but one thing I can stop worrying about is the direct schools grant deficit. At the moment, let's be pleased with the intended removal of the increasing £10 million deficit in RCC's budget. In terms of risk, I have challenged the Section 151 officer over what happens if we make a decision today for 0% and the government choose not to remove our deficit. There is a small chance this could happen. I'm happy that the implications of this scenario have been thought through and there is a plan to deal with it. This is an unlikely scenario, but a question I have to ask my Audit and Risk panel. My hesitation over this budget is the very ambitious £24 million capital programme for the 26-27 budget year. Delivery of this is a huge undertaking for Rutland. Indeed, if you include the administration of the Melton Love project, the capital budget rises to £31 million. My worry is that unless projects are completed or well underway and irreversible, under local government reorganisation and a new council, they may be stopped with funding diverted elsewhere. In Rutland, finding resource to deliver operational services and projects has been an ongoing challenge and risk to any delivery. Local government reorganisation and our short-term existence increases this resourcing challenge and consequent delivery risk. When I raised this through scrutiny, the answer I got from the leader was that we hope to have all projects in a position where they were either completed or at such an advanced stage that they would be irreversible by a new council attempting to change the programme. The ambition Rutland has to deliver all this change will take very strong leadership, drive, direction, programme management and governance to achieve. As custodian of this budget and for our Rutland residents, I would like the portfolio holder's assurance that this will be implemented. I applaud the fact we want to spend Rutland's money for Rutland's benefit and economy, but a cancelled project is money wasted. It's not the assurance that Councillor Johnson has done similarly before I'm asking for. So have I, but that's why I'm worried about delivery. But looking forward in best interest, I need his assurance. Please, Councillor Johnson, can I have your assurance and promise that projects in the budget plan for 26-27 will be delivered as forecast as per your budget proposal. The fact that financial sustainability strategy and transformation put in place by this Council in October 22, as stated in your papers for tonight, under Councillor Stevenson's auspices, which created firm foundations, still endures and is delivering today, is gratifying. I'm similarly pleased we have such an effective finance team led by our Section 151 officer. The finance team haven't worked in isolation though. They've worked with the rest of the Directorate to innovate and deliver more effective ways of working. The fact financial control is strong in this Council was reflected in an excellent external audit report from Grant Thornton, and I'd like to say a huge thank you to officers for this. And I wrote this before I knew about the award tonight. After a number of challenges to the Section 151 officer regarding financial risk, which were met and answered with some detail, and questions I put via the Scrutiny Committee, I still have hesitation regarding the delivery of the capital programme. Apart from that, due to the Section 151 officer's thorough response to my risk-based questions, I will be supporting Rutland's penultimate budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Smith first, then Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Johnson, in his presentation, and Councillor Ross have mentioned the high needs stability grant. And for once, I feel I'm not being a prophet of doom talking about the designated school grant and SEND. Because the high needs stability grant relieves Rutland 90% of its verified dedicated schools grant. And it will be continued for further 2 years, but there are conditions. And I'm sure you all know that in 2028, the government will take on SEND costs. I just want to mention that the designated school grant is ring-fenced and really is a credit. And we haven't been able to use the general fund to pay it down. We have put in the risk reserve £2 million, and this will pay off the other 10% of the local contribution that is required in the high needs stability grant. And what it's done is release funds, and Councillor Johnson has mentioned already that because of that, or partly because of that, we've been able to not increase the, but we haven't increased the general council tax. But, and there's always a but, we're not in the sunny uplands. We have to produce, as I said, a compliance with the high needs stability grant, and we have to produce a credible designated schools grant reform plan. Now, linked in with this, we had the other day the schools white paper, and it's a whole system review. And one of the big features of it, that schools and that SEND system have to work together. We have been, for a number of years now, implementing some of the things that the government want. For example, we've been investing in our early years, and we pinpointed in the early years where the problems arise. We have been prioritising in school provision of SEND in the mainstream schools. We have been improving our data, particularly that has been improved just recently because of transformation. One thing that did come out in the schools white paper was the idea that we should have a SEND specialist in the family health. So we are well placed to meet the reforms that the government want. Our Delivering Better Value programme, the East Midland Change Partnership we're involved in, and our own building belonging strategy. So the high needs stability grant is certainly welcome, but it doesn't eliminate risk to our medium-term financial strategy. And Councillor Johnson has pointed out that a further 2 million probably required. One of the problems is, though, that this high needs stability grant it deals with accumulated debt, but it doesn't deal with the structural causes. And hopefully the school's white paper will deal with some of this, but probably won't come into effect till 2030 or even later. And just point out what's causing the problem. It's the send and send costs, and particularly EHCPs. At the end of 24-25, we had 380 children with the active EHCPs, and it's now, in the third quarter, gone up to 426. And so, if it keeps on rising, it will increase the deficit over the next 2 years again. So, it's up to us in Children's Services to exert downward pressure on the rising EHCPs and the costs associated with it. But at the same time, obviously, we need to support our vulnerable children and their families, and if possible, increase the care we give to them. So,
Mr. Smith, are you about to finish?
I'm going to finish, yes. I just want to give my thanks to, like everyone else, to our finance team, who have done a wonderful job, and also to Children's Services, who I think have got in a good place.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't really sure what I was going to say tonight, so forgive me, I'm going to jot a few notes. I'm sure all of our residents welcome the fact that there's going to be, just the 2%. I think that's welcome. I'm a resident. I know how much my council tax costs, so the less it can be, the better for myself and for everybody else, and for all the things that you've said. But as Vice Chair of Scrutiny, I just want to put this point across. You made some references about the post-16 transport. You said that people were taking advantage of Rutland County Council's generosity. I'm not entirely sure that's how residents would see it. I'm certainly sure that those that have complained to me in writing about this provision being taken away or not being subsidised and they're having to pay more is not something that they've been taking advantage of. And when you compare Rutland to other neighbours, is that not like comparing pears to apples? And I say this because the offer of post-16 in Rutland is very different to other counties. It's very academic. It's either the 16 plus offer is through the private schools, either at Uppingham or Oakham, or you've got very academic with certain criteria to actually get into those post-16 colleges, Cadmus being one of them, Harrington being one of them. So often our children over the age of 16, and they have to stay in education, need to go to Stanford or Brooksby or MV16 because they offer a more wider choice and more practical courses. So I'm not entirely convinced that we have done a fair comparison, but I will stand corrected. I'd be interested to know as well is how well publicised this support fund is, and I'm not sure if you did use the word hardship fund, but whatever it's called, I think we've really got to be mindful about language, because language can be stigmatising, because I know a lot of very, very proud people who are really struggling, who don't like to ask for help, but don't like being called vulnerable, and they don't like the support being offered as hardship funds or something like that. So I just wanted to put that point As I say, it's welcome, and I'm sure I know a lot of hard work's gone into this, but I did want to pick on those points about the post-16 travel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Mark Chatfield, and then Councillor Ellison.
So I'm going to go off subject here. Do you mind if I close these windows?
Yes, feel free to close the windows.
Thank you.
We'll just wait for the windows to be closed before we go to Councillor Ellison. I did see you pulling your collar up, Councillor Chatfield. I wondered why. It's nice and warm this end. Councillor Ellison.
Thank you very much. I've written this beautifully, but people stole my thunder in lots of places. But I think the 40% costs of adult social care does need to be considered. It is, like other councils across the country, our costs have risen, but we know it's a statutory duty under the 2014 Adult Care Act, and is the largest outgoing for all county councils. We've had an increase in costs for the last few years by a rise in demand and complexity for both working age adults and old people's care. But I'm really pleased to say that staff have worked so well to address the pressures while maintaining the statutory objectives of high quality provision for all individuals requiring support. And done this by optimising the value for money through efficient budgeting, robust contract negotiations, and a focus on long-term preventative measures. The working age adult costs were driven up in part by higher than expected transition costs and reliance originally on out-of-county provision. This has been turned around by enhanced use of in-county provision, both day opportunities and supported living, and by attracting more users from the adjoining counties to use our services and increasing our income. Demand for adult social care has also been increasing and changing due to demographic changes of the population. We have more residents living longer and being cared for in their own homes for longer, but then some are being admitted to residential care homes at an older age with greater needs, resulting in higher than expected costs. To offset this, our officers have shown some excellent negotiating skills, resulting in increased block bed provision with many more banded rate beds, which reduce the average residential care costs, whilst maintaining the standards of quality of care. So this year, the budget is 40% of the adult social care budget, is 40% of the total budget. So we've got £22 million to go. And we've got to provide for the adult social care needs of the whole population, and covering the costs mentioned earlier by Councillor Johnson, and the provision for local link and the Meditech and the increased access at the Rutland Memorial Hospital, all of which are starting soon. So the last allocation we've got planned is again a wonderful one to support vulnerable residents by expanding community care, enhancing crisis response facilities, and implementing the Care Quality Commission improvement plan. And the one thing we can't control, addressing demand-driven pressures. So we're trying to prevent, and prevention is our key objective, but we don't always manage it, so we have to recognise and we can't refuse care, and we wouldn't want to. And lastly, I want to join in with a praise, particularly for my team. They have been wonderful. The ASCOF results have just been, we are again we're hitting above our weight, top 4 in those areas, and we've also had a very good results from our carers feedback. So I'm really impressed with how well they do, and I'd like to thank them, and I'd like to thank the Finance Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellison. Councillor Clifton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to start by thanking those officers and others who have taken the time to work on this budget. I would also like to thank the previous administrations in Rutland who did so much of the groundwork to enable Rutland to cope when the seas became stormy, who built solid foundations, and to whose foresight and fiscal prudence we owe a debt of gratitude. Much of what is being delivered in this budget flows clearly from the bedrock laid by previous Conservative and independent administrations. The levelling up funding one for our area under the leadership of a Conservative RCC and the hard work of our Member of Parliament, Alicia Cunt. The financial sustainability strategy now guiding the Council's long-term stability developed and embedded by the Rutland Conservatives. Responsible opposition means recognising when the right stepping stones are in place and helping to ensure they are followed in the best interests of Rutlanders. Only last week, Rutland County Council was named Best in the Country for Adult Social Care, to which I also extend my congratulations. Clearly, the one big fiscal problem we have in Rutland is our general grant allocation. This is £640 per dwelling, which is less than half of the national average, which works out at £1,413. Rutland's general grant allocation from government has decreased by £147 per dwelling since the council set its budget in 2024-25, and this comes on top of the abolition of the rural services grant last year costing over £1 million. All this in just 2 years from Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. And I look forward to the party opposite producing literature attacking Labour cuts in future. This Labour government has been a disaster for Rutland. It has dramatically reduced our funding, despite spending 14 years in opposition promising the opposite, and it plans to abolish us. Rutland's chronic lack of national funding means we continue to rely heavily on council tax to fund social services. Almost 80% of RCC's funding now comes from council tax, compared to a national average of 53%. It is important to say that none of this has anything to do with Rutland's size or with our council services. It is of interest that the old Rutland County Council, abolished in 1974, had the second lowest rates, the precursor to the modern council tax in the country. It doesn't take a mathematical genius to work out that were Rutland to receive its fair share of national funding, then we would again be a council with one of the lowest council taxes in the country, not one of the highest. The modern Rutland County Council has existed since the 1st of April 1997. This budget takes us to April 2027, so 30 years. There have been many successes, but also many challenges in these decades, not the least of which is our marked comparative economic decline nationally, with resulting pressures on budgets such as ours. The state is taking more and more, it is spending more and more, yet we don't seem to see very much for it sometimes. I hope that in the next 30 years we will try a different approach in order to try to get back to those sorts of positive economic statistics we saw in 1997. We need to follow common sense. Lighter taxed economies grow much faster. We need to follow the Laffer curve. It works. Now, because we here in Rutland have had to grapple with significantly less national government funding than the average council, we are both an outlier and an example of doing more with less. Over the next 30 years, the rest of the country is going to have to undergo exactly the same process, accompanied by a sensible and proportionate reduction in statutory service provision and the fixed costs of local government across the board. We have all had enough disruption and worry caused by this government, this council and this county. There will be battles ahead, and in that spirit I will vote for this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clifton. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. As an independent councillor, member of the previous cabinet and of this cabinet, it's good to know that I can take credit for both the legacy and the Thank you. Back to the budget. This budget, as has been said, isn't about numbers. You might be surprised that even as a chartered accountant, I think what's in the numbers are a window into what we're doing, into our priorities, into what we're actually doing for the residents, and that's what I'm here to do. Act for the residents and ignore the political toing and froing going on all around me. So in that, with my figures head and as a charter, I have obviously been through the figures with interest, our policies and the risk that's attached. And I do have confidence in this budget that it's a sustainable budget, it's a sensible budget, and has been, put together in the right way. I'm obviously disappointed, as we all are, that we can't have absolutely zero council increase for our residents this year. But I feel that this budget is sustainable. This is what we've got to do, and I know will be welcomed by our residents. That it's still an increase. We have to accept that, but it is a small 2% increase, as everyone around us faces a continued cost of living crisis. We know our council tax is high compared to others, and I do take the point that, government funding, which we're being disadvantaged by, and also partly our small but beautiful size. There's just a couple of things I'd like to draw attention to, and also correct, I think, a couple of things that have been reported in social media, which do relate to the capital programmes, which are in Appendix K. The firstly is that Rutland County Council is not paying Anglian Water £6 million to acquire the Rutland Sea Dragon. We're very close to signing the legal agreements to transfer its ownership to us so that we can start the conservation work and the digitalisation, which you'll see in the capital programmes. That was part of the Levelling Up Fund money to enable that, along with the digitalisation of the very important Rutland, the mosaic that was discovered. The £6 million that you'll see in that list is for the redevelopment of the museum as a cultural centre, not only to house the ichthyosaur in a special gallery, but also to create a multi-use space and to display and transform the display of our existing collections in the museum. Tourism is an important part of our economy, and that in boosting our local high streets, which certainly need a boost, and our businesses. And by this investment, we hope that that will help with our visitors' numbers and really is about investing in our county's future, which also applies, which again under my portfolio is under what's called public realm strategy, which is all about our streets, our signs and our spaces, with the investment in that. And I will, Councillor Payne mentioned the deliverability, which I'll leave probably Andrew Johnson, to Councillor Johnson, to sort of tackle that overall, but certainly I'm very aware of that on those projects that fall within my portfolio, to make sure that we can get them to a place where they're sustainable and have got to a sort of no return point with new government, with the local government reorganisation. The other thing that I have, also the factual thing, which I would also to correct on, that I have seen, that the Rutland Sea Dragon is not a dinosaur. It's an ichthyosaur, which are two very distinct prehistoric creatures. Ichthyosaurs are marine reptiles that lived in oceans, while dinosaurs were terrestrial reptiles that roamed the land. That's a very short explanation. If you've been to the talk at the museum by Dr. Dean Lomax, he gave a very long explanation of what is the difference. So we have a 10-metre long, which is huge, ichthyosaur, and it's the largest and most complete skeleton that's been found in the UK to date. So please we can call it a sea dragon or an ichthyosaur. So just to summarise that little, sorry I went off piece a bit. That yeah, fully support this budget. I believe it is a good and comprehensive budget. It sets out what we plan to do in the next year, 2 years, and also the investing in the economy and the general state, which will for all Rutland residents, while supporting the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Attenborough. Sorry, Councillor Waller.
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking everybody for their thoughtful contributions this evening. Setting a budget in the context we are in is not easy. And whatever we do, I can guarantee that some of our residents won't like it, because you can't please all the people all the time. But I would like to pick up something that Councillor Karen Payne said, and that's her concerns about delivering the capital programme. And it's something that I think that we all share the worries over that. Delivering a capital programme is always difficult, because you are subject to so many influences from outside. I mean, we saw it quite recently when we were developing the libraries for the Living Well services. Who would have thought we had a well in the middle of one of them? And it certainly wasn't on any of the records and had to be dealt with. And yes, it was dealt with, but it delayed the delivery of the programme. So things happen. Being conscious of that though, we have ensured that we've got a robust project management system, and more importantly, the Chief Executive has brought some coherence to the delivery of projects. So we have a much more centralised project management system now, which enables us through the, I forgot what we call it, it used to be the Asset Management Board, the Project Management Board, I think it's called now. Capital Programmes Board, that's it. Through that has a number of cabinet members on it, we do have an overview of all our projects, and I can promise you that we as members question quite closely. Some might say a little too closely in some instances, but nevertheless I believe in dotting I's and crossing T's. So I would like to reassure Councillor Payne that we are doing as much as is humanly possible to control. And also we're ensuring that the project's delivery timeline is closely aligned to the financial timeline, so that if we have a delay, the finance team are aware and can invest the money that we put to one side, we've got no reserves, to get some income from the council while we're waiting for the need to spend the money. So we are looking holistically at the issue. But what I really wanted to say tonight is about the 2% council tax increase. I read this week that the Resolution Foundation's Living Standards Outlook 2026 has found that incomes of the poorest half of households have grown by just 0.5% a year since the mid-2000s. And that will include Rutland residents. So we must remember our poorest households when setting our budgets. And this is people who have to use our food banks despite having full-time jobs. People who are facing homelessness despite being in work. And those who can't work due to ill health or disabilities, they all need our support. And tonight we have the opportunity to support them, thanks to the government agreeing to meet 90% now of the SEND deficit. There are conditions to giving us the 90%, but from what was published in the white paper this week about the reforms to SEND schools and so on, I am confident we will be able to meet those conditions, because all that they're predicated on is what we have been doing for the last 2 or 3 years around the prevention agenda, and is what we are still doing and is in our capital programme. So we're holding our council tax rise to 2%, that's the Adult Social Care Precept element, rather than the 4.9% recommended by government. 2% is still a rise, of course, but it's better than nearly 5%, which is what the government wants.
Councillor Warren?
Yeah, okay. But there is another reason, if you will indulge me, to council tax, and Councillor Johnson touched on it, and that is we have the highest council tax of any area the government chooses to put us with. And it is incumbent on us to try and close the gap, begin the harmonisation now, because we do not want to be in a position that we move into a new council where we have the highest council tax for the 7 years the new council is allowed to take to harmonise.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Councillor Helmsley.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a question of the leader about devolution and the delay that happened for Norfolk and Suffolk. And I was very pleased that she mentioned right at the beginning that it's very unlikely to cause a problem in this county, because I can see that being a risk. So it's good to know that we're there, we're covered on that. Councillor Clifton, I thoroughly enjoyed your view on things, but I do think that this is our budget, and it's regardless of the parties, I would like to thank the finance team for doing an amazing job, and everyone else who has done their input and been out there asking questions. And I think it's really important that we understand, actually it's for us to own it and for us to go out there. And for those people that need support, Citizens Advice Rutland was mentioned and things, there are some really good things sitting there. We need to be promoting them clearly to our communities where they need it. Thank you.
Councillor Huntsley. Councillor Dinsmore.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by congratulating the finance team and saying my thanks for their hard work in putting together this budget. It is an incredibly difficult task, which is not assisted by central government's increasing demands that we do more with less. It has been a difficult decision for me as to whether to vote for this budget. We are elected to make difficult decisions, and I do not think it right to abstain on a vote of this importance. This left me on the horns of a dilemma, and I have come down in favour of voting for this budget for 3 reasons. First, as noted by my Conservative colleague, much of this budget follows through in the work of the last Conservative administration, which I'm delighted to see. Secondly, a key principle in this budget is to use Rutland reserves and projects that are for Rutland. To vote against this budget and to cause it to collapse would hinder our ability to deploy those resources locally in the limited time that we have left before LGR takes effect. Thirdly, as noted by many councillors this evening, including the leader and Councillor Stevenson, much of this budget is beyond our control. There are legal obligations on the Council in relation to services that it must provide, limits on its ability to raise funds through council tax or otherwise, no ability to seriously influence the grossly unfair funding formula with central government, and restrictions on what pots of money can be used for what purpose. As a result, the vast majority of this budget is actually beyond the administration's control, such that it's not really subject to a meaningful vote this evening. My difficulties, however, have arisen from the lack of clarity in the budget documentation, where the administration has not made clear, 1, what it is required to provide, 2, what it is able to provide to external funding, for example, the levelling up grants obtained by the Conservative group when in administration, 3, where and how it is increasing charges, and precisely what capital projects are funded by what reserves. State fees and charges, for example, this budget itself is wholly unclear. I contrast Appendix E of this budget, which notes the fees and charges policy, written at a high level of principle, with that, for example, in Hammersmith and Fulham at Appendix E, where you can see from this table the charges last year, the charges this year, and then the increases. There is no equivalent table in the documentation. Councillor Heckles has pointed out one example of green waste, which he dug into the detail. That is a long-winded and difficult process, and I would hope that future budgets can make it clearer for residents exactly where choices are being made to increase discretionary charges. As to capital projects, there is no clarity in the budget as to precisely how much of the reserves are being spent on precisely which projects, such that it's very difficult for residents to ascertain how their local money is being spent locally. Whilst I applaud the fact that council tax is not increasing, with the exception of the adult charge precept, the first question that we are likely to be asked is why council tax cannot come down in circumstances where the reserves are being depleted. Residents will no doubt ask whether many of these capital projects are really necessary and why the money could not have been used to give some reprieve during the cost of living crisis and before LGR takes effect. Similarly, in relation to capital projects, and with my own ward in mind, the only mention of a capital project in Barleythorpe is the active travel plan to the road juncture of Cole over to the road in Barleythorpe. That is, of course, welcome, but is an example where the provision of funding appears to be from government grant tax money reserves. As the Council will be aware, there are many issues facing Barleythorpe in desperate need of further funding, including 1, assistance with further flood prevention, 2, tree maintenance on the main road in Barleythorpe, 3, speed prevention measures on the main road in Barleythorpe, and 4, more investment in activities for young people following the close of Catmas Sports Centre. On the basis of these budget documents, it will be difficult to explain to residents why and how other projects have been prioritised over these. That is unsatisfactory and does make accountability difficult. I will nevertheless vote for this budget for the reasons outlined at the beginning of my speech, but I do so with considerable hesitation given the lack of transparency in some of the key decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dinsmore. Councillor Paulborough. Oh, sorry, I was told you were wanting to speak by the CEO. Any other members? It's Councillor Heckles.
The disadvantage of going last, of course, everyone's already covered most of the points, and I had to scribble most of my speech out. 2026 isn't looking great. Unemployment levels have hit a 5-year high. Wage growth is slowing. Graduate recruitment, which is affecting our family, has fallen to a record low, dropping to 45% year on year. Many believe this to be due to Labour pricing young people out of the workforce. This means many young people are struggling to find jobs and will need financial support. So it's incredibly welcome that there will be no council tax rise in the budget. Although I do need to mention that obviously our council tax is at an all-time high. As Councillor Clifton mentioned, we must remind you that we really need to push for fairer funding, and hopefully the leader can maybe be encouraged to write again to government on this. We're delighted that the government actually announced on the 9th of February that they would cover 90% of the council spend overspend to 31st of March 2026. I calculated this was reportedly to be around 10 million. It's definitely a welcome relief. My worry is that this overspend may well begin to grow again. Our President's councils are able to keep high needs deficits, which is an overspend where spend costs exceed the budget available, off their main balance sheets through a temporary accounting mechanism known as statutory override. This high needs dedicated school grant, this is the high needs dedicated school grant deficit. Sorry, that's a real tongue twister. Worryingly, this override is due to end in March 2028, when I understand these deficits move on to the council books of a new council if that happens. A recent Local Government Association survey said that 79% of councils who responded will not be able to set a balanced general budget in 2028-29. So it's going to be very difficult for us all going forward. I also think we need to repeat, and I think that a lot of people have already said this already, that the increase of 2% is an increase in the Adult and Social Care Precept. It's actually not the council tax. In an ideal world, these would also be frozen. However, unfortunately, we have inflation, and as everybody knows, all costs rise with inflation. We are the foremost in the country for adult and social care, which is exemplary, and our team should be applauded for this achievement. To the residents in Rutland that require it, this is a lifeline that is both unmatched and invaluable. One of the issues that my residents repeatedly raise is the condition of our roads and potholes. The thing that always surprises me is how little of the budget highways actually have. They get a very small slice of the cake. I believe it's around 5.6 million for highways and transport, which I calculated to be 5.8% of our total spend. And this obviously includes transport, so highways is going to be less. This does seem quite low when the state of our roads affects every one of us. I did drive into a neighbouring county and unfortunately hit a large pothole that's so deep that I actually thought I was going to have a blowout on my tyre, and there was a loud clunk because I think the front end might have clipped or something. Residents complain about our roads, but compared to our neighbours, our roads are actually brilliant. So I'd like to congratulate highways and thank them for looking after us all with their financial constraints. I would definitely support an increase to the highways budget, given that there can be no price put on resident safety. I'm delighted to hear from Councillor Johnson that there will be more money heading towards highways. The next bit of my speech was about green waste, so I thank Councillor Wise for saying that our low income families will be receiving hopefully a rebate. I calculated that to be £18.25. Finally, I'd like to thank the officers for working hard to produce these budgets. I know a lot of you work very quietly to help and keep Rutland the wonderful place that it is, and I will be supporting this budget. I wasn't happy about the green waste, but as I said, Councillor Wise has explained that situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Eccles. Timing almost to the second there. Councillor Stevenson, then Councillor Wilkie.
Thank you very much, Chair. Few notes about budgets up front and centre. I'm supporting this budget. Clearly, it would be particularly ridiculous given a well-deserved nomination for a award looking over to the back where the officers are. What I will speak to, though, is around the national context for a start off. £2 billion have been pushed towards most deprived urban councils, seeing rural councils see a reduction, as I think Councillor Johnson said, of approximately 19% for Rutland. For me, this continues to show that central government does not understand that delivering service in rural areas is more expensive. We saw that last year when our rural services grant was removed overnight. The one thing that I would say, though, the surprise announcement, and this does seem to be a flavour of our government to make announcements, U-turns, etc., was around the dedicated schools grant. Seeing the original 1.9% increase in consultation papers being reduced to 0%, which clearly, as Councillor Carr and others have said, is very welcome for our residents when everything is getting more expensive. I thought the covering paper for that special cabinet paper on the 17th of February was very, very useful, and I don't wish to hammer a point home. Regardless of politics, local government is an evolutionary process. It is a slow-moving ocean liner. So actually, this is a compliment to lots of members who've been on this council for years. In that cabinet paper, years of disciplined financial management. So every councillor who supported the budget in previous years, every councillor who's presented the budget, we've been doing the right thing with very good support from officers. Past decisions by members to prioritise sustainability and resilience. Again, anybody who's voted for the financial sustainability strategy when it first appeared in 2022, well done, good call. Anybody who voted for a transformation programme when that appeared in 2022, well done, good decision for Rutland residents. Levelling up funding, I'm glad that we accepted it. Well done to anybody who voted for that, regardless of politics. So legacy actually works both ways. It's what we're planning for in the future, but it's what we are inheriting. Rutland has always been strong, robust and financially sound. I'm now going to move on to my expectations of the administration. I'm supporting this budget. Last year I abstained on grounds of lack of clarity in the fees and charges. The portfolio holders are responsible for making sure that members are absolutely briefed so we know what is coming out in the public domain, so that if necessary we are directing residents to the various funds available. But I actually take Councillor Carr's point. We've all got pride. Making people constantly go cap in hand for something that should be there, that needs to be acknowledged. If there is going to be a material difference to residents, for example, residents who budgeted for £600 in the summer for a bus pass to suddenly find it's £1,000 at the end of the summer holiday with school uniforms and clubs coming up, we must show that we are in touch with what it means to be living now. Where we know there is going to be a material change to service, where we know that there is going to be an increase in a fee or a charge, which we all look as though we're going to support, even though it's a strategy and it's not specific, we must know the specifics. We must know the logic, we must hear the leadership, we must hear the direction, so that we can stand behind this budget, because that's what we're about to do this evening with our hands, judging by the mood of the room. But let us be able to do that for this forthcoming year. Let us do our jobs well, and that isn't the officer's job, that is down to the administration and the individual portfolio holders. I will stop now, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Wilkie.
Thank you, Chair. Our world is in a very dodgy state at the moment. Our nation is in a pretty dodgy state at the moment. And here we are at local government level in also a very dodgy state because we don't know who's going to be running what tomorrow. I'm going to support this budget because I know it's a sound budget and it's been laid on good foundations. And I thank, like everyone else, our finance team who've done a fantastic job in pushing out the budget. And we are in good shape because we've got our adults and health going well as well. But I tell you, whatever happens, Councillor Johnson raised the right point to saying we've got to be nimble. I'm not quite sure I can see Councillor Johnson being nimble, but we do have to work together, as Councillor Hemsley has said, over the next months, years, because there's all hell coming down that road, coming towards us. I'm glad we've got Councillor Powell looking after our projects, because there is no better steward of that sort of thing than her. But no, I think we have all got to work together, make sure our staff are happy and there are enough of them to do the business. I hope, Chief Executive, you won't just sort out some of the cohesion, you will get all of the cohesion sorted out for all our plans. So I will support the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkie. Any other members? Councillor West.
Thank you, Chairman. A bit like Councillor Eccles, most of what I wanted to say has been said, but I would just like to say that I always enjoy hearing about Conservative achievements, particularly since over the last 7 years I've been in this room. It's required fewer and fewer Conservative members to achieve them. I want to use the next couple of minutes mainly as an invitation to any reform candidates who might be out there in Rutland. And I've heard an awful lot about them in the national press, about how they wish to find, how they thought they would find a lot of waste in local government finance, and how they have not found any waste in local government finance where they've been looking for it, and Kent is the main example of this. And so I would like to use this as an opportunity to extend an invitation to anybody out there who wears a reform cap to come and scrutinise our budget and find zero waste in here as well. This is as stripped down to the bone and as lean as it can possibly be, and there is no waste. So they can jog on to the next result. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Farina.
Considering this evening's, thank you, Councillor. Considering this evening's budget for 26-27, I understand the hard work that goes into developing this budget. So well done to the portfolio holder and to the finance team for all your hard work. As the cost of living soars and costs increase, Rutland County Council is still feeling the effects of the government removal of the Rural Services Delivery Grant, putting everyone in a difficult position and having to scratch around to try and find savings. For too long, I feel the council tax has stopped representing good value for money, and numerous councils have seen, in some cases, an unreasonable increase. What also must be considered is the steady increase of the council taxpayers' household bills increasing. In the integrated budget plan, section 1.2.3, proposed budget for 26-27, which included an increase of 2% of which has been specifically earmarked for adult social care. But what is also important is to note that this figure has been reduced from an increase of 3.9%, so a total of 1.9% instead, as the government will be covering 90% of the authority school deficit. I think that is only appropriate to support this increase when other councils are being forced to make increases to council tax way above the fair minimum. It's somewhat of of a relief that Rutland County Council is bucking the national trend, and I'm sure everyone can wholly agree the importance of adult social care and the demands that it brings. So this is not necessarily a council tax increase, but the 2% is to cover increasing demand for adult social care costs. To summarise, as we're about to move into the next phase of local government reorganisation, which brings with it many uncertainties and anxiety, bear in mind that all councils, including this council, need a legal and balanced budget to go forward. Whatever the next couple of years hold for Rutland, we can only do our utmost to try and support the quality of life in Rutland. And going forward in 2026, I will be a happy councillor if we can focus on the issues of flooding, where I represent a ward that has been significantly blighted by this issue, and also to look at the issue of potholes in our roads and see a significant improvement investment in the quality of roads. Despite raising these concerns, with that being said, I will be supporting the budget tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Any other members? Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you, Chair. I've left it very late tonight, so I don't have to say much at all. Just everybody said. But I just wanted to draw upon 2 or 3 little points, which I wrote down. Core spending, down £280 per dwelling. Grant allocation, down £360 per dwelling. Our council tax proportion of spending is 81%. Against a national average of 55%. We all know those figures. What we've not talked about too much tonight is the consultation. And I read through the consultation this afternoon. And I wrote down a few points that popped out more than most. Roads, rubbish. Potholes need doing. 6 million on a cultural centre. Climate change, do we need to sort it out? What are we worried about that for? And then what struck me probably the most was keeping informed, stroke messaging. I saw that a lot. And I think this was epitomised by this one comment, which is as follows. Local feeling is very negative. Mainly, I believe, the fact that the council don't broadcast enough to let local residents know the restrictions on the council. I think that is something that we should all think about. In terms of our budgets, let me tell you, I've got 4 children, young families themselves. They will be delighted that there is no council tax increase this year. That will help them with their childcare and so many things. It will be great for them. But this local feeling is quite negative. It's something I'm sure as councillors we've all come across. And I'm not going to be critical here because as councillors we read the documents, we know it's our job to put that messaging out there. But I'm going to put it as a thought to everybody that we need to consider our messaging to our residents. I was at a parish meeting last night and a resident was quite furious about the great big black bins scenario, particularly the waste situation. And I explained to him that here's the cost actually, at the end of this 12 months period, all the costs associated with our waste and replacement bins should be paid for. What we need is people to correctly use those bins. My concern in the budget is if people don't fill the bins with the correct stuff, we're not going to make any more money. This time next year we'll be pushed a bit further down the road. I sit as a risk chair, I know the stuff about inflation and all that. Don't overcomplicate it with people. But I put forward that, and I just think that our messaging, not a push on our communications at all, but we need to think about that. When we talk about potholes, yes, we know. My son lives in Corby, drives into Keston every day because he can't afford to live in Rutland, unfortunately. He's borrowed my car for last week because he's blown his tyre through the damage. You want to see the roads in Corby? I know, as we know, the roads are good here. We know what our record on social care. We know all those things that we do very well, and we know as a county actually we are right up there in the lead throughout the country. What I think we just need to consider more is how we get that correct message across to our residents in terms that is understandable, to lift that gloom amongst residents. I think that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbett.